Guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone's good and staying safe and healthy. If you guys are home quarantining, you might be as bored as I have been, so I hope this video entertains you for the next 10-15 minutes or so. Today's story is going to be the unsolved murder of Tina McNeminen. Before we get into the video, I do want to give a quick shout out to this Reddit user. Because of their thread, I actually came across this story and I got most of the information from the Reddit thread and from the That's Sus podcast. So shout out to both of them. If you guys are new here, my name is Larky. I make true crime videos. I would love it if you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure to thumbs up this video and make a comment down below on what you guys have been up to in this quarantine. Without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Martina McNeminen was born on September 22nd, 1976. She lived with her mom, Bernadette, after her parents divorced when she was little. She loved polar bears and hard rock music, and her mom described her as someone who hadn't found her niche yet. Tina grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, alongside her best friend Sarah Bognich, who she had known since middle school. They attended the Daniel J. Gross Catholic High School, where Tina participated in the varsity cheerleading squad, the school newspaper, and the GADA club, which was the Gross Against Drugs and Alcohol. After graduating high school in 1994, the girls enrolled in the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where Tina majored in general studies. Now, I'm not sure if this was her actual major or if she was undecided and was just taking general classes, but in her first year, Tina excelled in classes like art, creative writing, and political science. After their first year, the girls decided that they had enough with dorm life and they moved off campus, where they shared an apartment in the Amberwood Apartments complex. This complex was located in a part of town that was known to be quiet and had a low crime rate. That summer, Tina also got a job at Godfather's Pizza, which was less than a 5-minute drive from her apartment, the day of her murder, which was July 25th, 1995. So it seems like on that Tuesday, Tina either had 2 shifts at work or her shift was split into 2, because she finished her first shift at 2 o'clock and then she was expected to come back at 5:30 that evening. So she had a little bit of time to herself between her shifts. She spent most of this time hanging out at her apartment, and Sarah was also there until about 4:45 until she had to go to work. Since Tina lived so close to Godfather's Pizza, she could literally leave 10 minutes before her shift and make it in time. During the remainder of time that she had before work, Tina spent her time speaking on the phone with her friend Lou, who was a mutual friend of hers and Sarah's. Tina and Lou were on the phone until about 5:17 p.m. when Tina hung up to head to work. Later that night at around 10:19 p.m., Sarah got home and noticed some odd things as soon as she got to the apartment. She noticed the first thing as soon as she opened her apartment door, which was that the living room light was off. And this was unusual because the light switch was about 15 feet away from the front door, so the girls would always leave the light on when they went out at night so they wouldn't have to return to a dark apartment. As soon as Sarah turned on the light, her confusion turned to horror when she saw that the entire apartment had been ransacked. Sarah assumed that Tina had gotten home from work and quickly left after she saw the condition of the apartment. She also noticed that the answering machine light was on, meaning that they had new messages, and she checked them thinking that they were from Tina. Things only got worse from here because the messages were actually from Tina's boss, asking if everything was okay because she did not show up for her shift. By this point, Sarah knew something was very wrong, so she walked around the apartment calling out Tina's name. She said she walked past Tina's room a few times before noticing Tina's lifeless body lying in a pool of her own blood. Sarah immediately called the police, who told her to leave the apartment until they arrived at the scene. Police initially thought that a burglary had occurred due to the condition of the apartment, but they quickly ruled out this theory after realizing that no items were missing from the home. They also noticed a strong smell of bleach in the bathroom. Police found that Tina had been physically and sexually assaulted. She had been stabbed 7 times and had multiple cut wounds. Bloodstains were found on the walls and on some of Tina's clothes. They also found a knife with a wooden handle next to Tina's left hand, but police weren't sure if the knife was taken from the kitchen in the apartment or if it was brought in by the killer. There was barely any DNA evidence, but police did find a single strand of hair on one of Tina's hands, which they collected for DNA evidence. They also collected the wooden handle knife, a second knife, and a wallet that was found on the floor at the crime scene as evidence. The official cause of death was determined to be blood loss from multiple sharp force injuries. In the initial investigation, police believed that the killer attempted to clean themselves in the apartment after the murder because of the strong smell of bleach. They believe the murder took place between 5:17 when Tina got off the phone with Lou and when she was expected to be at work. They also speculated how the killer was able to get into the apartment because there was no sign of forced entry. Although there's a really small window of time for when the murder could have occurred, detectives did suspect that the killer remained in the apartment for some time because the first witness sightings didn't happen until 9 o'clock that night. Police talked to 2 residents of the complex that had been home since around 5:15 that afternoon, but they did not see or hear anything out of the ordinary. They also spoke with 2 other witnesses who reported seeing a young man running around the complex at around 9 that night. So I'm going to put a description of what the witnesses reported right on the screen because this is a direct quote from the Reddit thread. So the person was described as a white male between 18 and 22 years old. He was approximately 5 feet 10 inches and he weighed between 150 to 170 pounds. He was reported to be thin with muscular arms and legs and was wearing his collar-length blonde hair in a ponytail. He didn't have any facial hair and he possibly wore a gold hoop earring in his left ear. He was described as wearing white or gray loose-fitting shorts and a red or pink button-down shirt with a micro-check pattern. After the murder, investigators got right to work. They sent the DNA evidence to Cellmark Diagnostics for testings. They also processed background checks on the residents of Amberwood Apartments, Tina's classmates, and known sex offenders in the area. Investigators interviewed over 300 people and started collecting voluntary blood samples from persons of interest. Police did have a few persons of interest and suspects in this case. The first person of interest came from an anonymous tip in September of 1995 that claimed that a person by the name of Patrick Holmes had murdered Tina. However, no person by this name was ever identified, so this quickly turned into a dead end. The next person of interest was an Amberwood Apartments resident by the name of Daniel Stroll. He was a 21-year-old man who was charged with first-degree murder in December of 1995. Stroll was charged with the murder of 51-year-old Pamela Kelly, whom he beat, sexually assaulted, and then ran over with his car. Although this seemed like a promising lead, there was no evidence connecting Stroll to Tina's murder, and he had an alibi. Stroll said that he was working on the night of Tina's murder, and this was confirmed through his time card. Almost a year after the murder, investigators had their first official suspect when the results on the DNA testing done on the hair found at the crime scene came back on June 4th, 1996. Of the people who had submitted voluntary DNA samples, only one person had matched the DNA profile of the hair found at the crime scene, and that person was Gregory Gable. Gable was a Lincoln resident who was in his early 30s. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he had been known around town as well as being on police's radar for having previous charges of third-degree sexual assault as well as public indecency. On top of the DNA evidence already linking him to the crime scene, there was witness testimony that had placed him near the scene of the crime on the night of the murder. Gable was seen at a Sonic nearby the crime scene at around 10 p.m. that night. However, this wasn't something that was unusual for Gable because that Sonic had a promotion every Tuesday night in which they offered half-price burgers, and Gable was known to be there almost every Tuesday. Gable was known around town for being a little socially inappropriate, and he was also known to have what people would call a computer-like memory. For example, some of the local residents had recalled seeing him at the grocery stores looking at like the back of like medicine or pasta or anything like that, and he would look over the ingredients one time and he could literally tell them every single ingredient that was listed on the back of whatever product he was looking at just by looking at it that one time. Most of the Sonic employees remember Gable for frequently trying to eat inside the restaurant without a shirt on, and none of them recognized him as being the guy depicted in the police sketch. They also didn't really believe that a person like him would commit such a heinous crime. Gable was arrested on June 25th, 1996, and he was officially charged 2 days later. Throughout the entire trial, Gable maintained his innocence and officially entered into a not guilty plea on November 13th of that year. Even though they had the forensic evidence connecting Gable to the crime, many people didn't believe that he was the actual killer, and they worried that police would use his diminished mental capacity to get a false confession out of him. Some people pointed out that none of the witness sightings reported the person wearing glasses, and Gable was known for always wearing large round frame glasses because of his poor sight. To this, police just responded by saying that the person in the case wasn't necessarily a suspect and they dismissed the discrepancies. So in December of 1997, a judge ordered for a psychological evaluation to be performed on Gable to see if he was mentally fit to stand trial. And then a month later, a second DNA test was ordered on the hair sample. So the second test used a mitochondrial DNA analysis approach, and like you, I am no scientist, so I have no idea what that means, but basically it was supposed to be better than the first test in that it would provide more precise results. So the hair sample was sent to Penn State University so that they could perform this new fancy DNA test on it. And while they were waiting for the results, Gable was declared to be mentally incompetent for trial because of his mental illness. So in March of 1998, they were just not having it with this, and they decided to perform a second psychological evaluation on Gable. But before this evaluation could be performed, the results of the DNA test came back, and the DNA of the hair sample found at the crime scene did not match Gregory Gable's DNA. So because of this, the entire case just fell apart. So I'm sure you're wondering how this could have happened, but like I said earlier, I'm no scientist, so me trying to explain this might confuse you even more. So I'm going to try to do this in the simplest terms possible. But basically, the first test was not as definitive and did not give as accurate results as the second test. So the hair sample found at the crime scene and Gable's DNA matched by pure coincidence. Like there was a 1 in 1,049 chance of that happening. And it happened. So unfortunately, the second DNA test used pretty much all of the DNA evidence that police had in storage, so there's no way that they can retest to confirm these findings. On July 16th, 1998, Gable was released 2 years after his arrest. So police still consider Gable to be a suspect, but for the time being, they've decided not to try him for Tina's murder in hopes that in the future they do find more concrete evidence that they can use. To be honest, I have no idea if any of the suspects in this case are the actual killer. I don't know if there's enough evidence to convince me that Gable was the actual killer, but I also don't want to rule him out just because he was close to the crime scene. And I mean, that's really the only thing linking him to the crime, since they don't have the DNA evidence linking him to the crime. I don't know. This is a really interesting case, and again, shout out to that Reddit user for the thread, because without that thread, I would have never come across this case. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that I was able to occupy your mind and take your mind off of all the craziness that's been going on right now, at least for a few minutes out of the day. I will see you guys in my next video, and in the meantime, stay safe, wash your hands, and stay inside if you can. I'll see you guys next time.